Grand Rising and welcome to New Mind, where our intention is clear and is to share information for transformation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode on our YouTube channel if you're watching or listening to the stream. But I encourage you, if you have a YouTube access, check out what we're doing here at the studio in Dubai. My intention is to make this as interactive as possible for those of you who like motion, who like some visuals and images as well. So guys, picking up from my first episode, which was setting the tone. If you haven't listened to that, please do. My intention here is very clear. I want to start this episode and get straight into it by covering principle number 1, which is master your inner world, the belief system that creates your reality. Now, guys, here's the truth. Your trading results don't just come from your strategy. They come from your beliefs. Let me explain. So every time you have those hesitations, those premature exits, every oversized or even undersized entry, it all starts in your mind. So the idea here, and to get into the detail of it, is understanding, first of all, your mind. What do we say it starts with your mind? What does that actually mean? First of all, we need to understand that your mind is divided into two compartments, two places, two parts of who you are. The first one is the conscious mind. You guys heard me, if you've been listening to this podcast from Rising Mind days, I always talk about the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. People call it the subconscious mind, right? But in reality, in my model of the world, it's called the unconscious mind because you're unaware of it. But here's something very interesting. And in case you didn't know this and you're new to this podcast, but 95% of who you are is a set of unconscious, i.e. subconscious, behaviors, programs running on autopilot. But they are designed in a way that are subjective to your own perceptions of reality, your own internal conditioning, right? Your own internal perception of what you've been through, what beliefs you hold, how you perceive reality is subjective to your belief system. I say this a lot, and if you've heard me say this before, I'm here to remind you one more time. What you believe, you perceive, and what you perceive, you experience. Let me repeat that one more time. What you believe, you perceive, and what you perceive, you experience. So that's the power of your belief. All the beliefs you hold, whether you're aware of them or not, specifically the limiting beliefs, the limiting decisions in your life, they have an influence on your behavior, right? They influence how you think, how you feel, and how you trade. So your trading results is a mirror of this identity, of the identity of who you believe you are. And the market is always going to give that feedback back to you, that mirror back to you. So if you have conditioning and beliefs that are stemmed from fear, you will reflect those fears in doubts, in decision-making processes, in how you approach your trading and how you approach life for that matter. But we're talking about trading because this season is related to mastering and becoming a master in your trader. So the principle in the essence of it is understanding your inner world. Understanding that there is work to be done in our inner world in order to reflect that in our outer world. So, and one of that part of the unconscious mind, or the subconscious for those of you who call it subconscious again, is your beliefs. And the beliefs shape up your identity. And if you have an identity that is fearful, that has doubts, that has unprocessed emotions from the past, being it anger, frustration, any unprocessed emotion that sits in your nervous system, sits in your body, it will have an impact on your beliefs. It will have an impact on your trading. So a very common hidden belief that I found with traders over the years that really affect their performance is the belief that they're not good enough. Or they have a belief that they always mess it up. Or they have a belief that I don't deserve to win, right? Now, it's very important to understand that these beliefs should not be just looked like as an ignored, because what happens is if you have those beliefs in your system, they will impact your trading. They will impact your confidence. They will impact and self-sabotage you in some cases. Because beliefs, what they do is they create an emotional trigger, right? The belief creates an emotional trigger. Because remember, your belief stems from your conditioning, but it also transmutes certain thoughts. So if you have thoughts, like I just mentioned, I'm not good enough, I always mess things up when I make money, when I go, I can't oversize, I don't deserve to win big. Those beliefs create an emotional trigger, and then they have emotional responses. They have behaviors that match that. A very common one, I'm sure if you're a trader and listening to this or watching this, a very common emotional trigger is fear. Fear of missing out, right? Or hesitation. That tends to happen a lot. Or in some cases, a lot of traders have this element of revenge trading, right? Revenge trading, trying to fight back that feeling, fight back to get their gains back, whatever they've lost, or just fighting the market, but they're actually fighting themselves. This is the reality, by the way, guys. They're fighting themselves. And deep understanding that is what we call part of that identity, part of that personality, part of that way of thinking, the mindset around their trading and how they approach trading in their day-to-day life. So an important element here is understanding that the principle of changing your perception about yourself, about the beliefs you hold, which is your inner world, is going to have a very, very positive and direct impact in your trading and in your life. I always say this is all interconnected. You know, we work on one part of someone's life and then it influences their trading, or we work on one part of their trading, it influences their life. They're all interconnected because it's the same identity. The same identity that's sitting and doing their trading in the morning or in open hours or whenever they're trading, it's the same person that's off when he's not trading. It's the same identity. It's the same personality, right? And you know me, I'm all about shifting that identity in order to create a new personal reality, a new feedback, a new way of being, a new way of experiencing different results in our life. Because if you keep getting the same results, the same patterns that keep showing up in your trading or in life, then you know that it's not out there that's the problem. It's in here, within us. So until we change, until we face those shadows, until we do the inner work, and people don't know what inner work means. Well, I'm busy explaining it, right? Inner work is updating your conditioning, updating your beliefs, getting rid of all those old beliefs in the system based on your past and the emotions associated with that past, because that ultimately changes your identity, right? And it's very important because as your identity starts to change, as you start to shift, your mindset starts to shift, right? Because I'll give you an example. So for example, one of the things I see a lot, patterns that I see a lot, and I've extracted that pattern, is with traders that are stuck or traders that don't really grow, is a scarcity mindset. So ask yourself, do you believe you have a scarcity mindset? And so what does a scarcity mindset mean? A scarcity mindset, if you want to trace that back, you will notice the behaviors, right? Where they're, first of all, forcing trades. They are thinking it's never enough. They want always more. They have a lot of fear of missing out, right? That's scarcity. That's not an abundance mindset, right? An abundance mindset and an abundance identity, it allows patience. You know, you have more consistency. You don't act yourself outside your self-concept. You're not sabotaging, right? There's more of an understanding that there is it's a marathon, not a race. You are creating momentum and you are okay to miss an opportunity. It's not the end of the world. And you know that there will always be more opportunities for you to capture, but not beat yourself down about missing something or doing something wrong and being at the end of the world and then beating yourself up. Because that's the identity of a scarcity mindset. So with my work and my line of work, every single trader I've worked with over the years, I've always made sure that I completely recondition their mind to have an abundant mindset, to have a mindset that there is always opportunities, there's always capabilities, but it's not just saying it, but it's also feeling it, right? Because our mind and our state is always thinking and feeling. So having that optimal state is very, very important. This is why I'm a big fan about priming yourself at the beginning of the day to get yourself in a very powerful state. And that's why I have specific and have designed guided experiences, guided meditations and breath that is designed, literally designed to get the trader in a very powerful state of being to commence and start their trading day. Not in a lack mindset, not in a fearful mindset, but in a whole mindset, in an abundant mindset. So they actually change how they perceive the opportunities and they're not running and chasing. So this is really, really important. So if you're listening to this or if you're watching this, guys, remember, principle number 1 is about taking a deep look inside of you. Really having a close look inside of you, taking a deep look, and without judgment, without being hard on yourself, but literally just reflecting. Maybe, an actionable insight here for you is take a pen and paper, and write down 3 reoccurring trading mistakes that keep happening to you. Just write them down. Things that you see that as a pattern, they keep happening to me, these reoccurring trading mistakes. And then ask yourself, what would I have to believe about myself or money for this mistake to keep happening? Because the evidence is in the patterns. I always say this, the evidence is in the patterns. Look at those patterns, and your job, if you want to do the work, at least as an actionable insight for you to do this today, or when you're listening to this, is to try your best to trace it back. Trace that pattern back to what belief that you have that keeps creating the same pattern in your trading. Of course, a pattern that you don't want, a limiting pattern, right? Limiting patterns are connected to limiting decisions. They're connecting to a limited identity of the self and the emotion and the state, right? So one more time, write those 3 down and then ask yourself, if I have to believe, what do I have to believe about myself for this to keep happening? Why does it keep happening, right? And then when you identify that, do yourself a favor. Replace each one of those beliefs, those limiting beliefs, the limiting decisions, at least for now consciously, right, to empowering beliefs. So let me give you guys an example. So a lot of the times I work with traders who sabotage themselves. And they literally tell me, I always sabotage myself. I always sabotage myself. When I'm about to make a certain amount of money, something happens and I sabotage. My state changes, I feel emotions, I feel freak out, and I sabotage myself. Every time I size up or something, as I get close to a specific threshold, I sabotage myself. So now that becomes ingrained in their system, right? Because it's happened a few times and they had an emotion associated with it. So it's cemented in their nervous system. It becomes a perception, a belief. It becomes real. And what you want to do, as an example, you find the opposite. So for example, I always sabotage myself to I trust my process. You write down, I trust my process, and you keep repeating that over and over again. In the morning, when you start your trading, you repeat that. Now that's full transparency. That's surface level shifting, right? You're trying to reinforce that in your mind. And in some cases, it's like it acts as an affirmation. You're trying to override that old way of thinking. And then many times it helps. It really does. But with all honesty and full transparency, it doesn't really get to the root cause in some cases, especially if you've been doing this for years, especially if you don't trust yourself for many years, and you have this, this identity of self-sabotaging yourself when success shows up because you don't believe you're worthy of it. You don't believe you're good enough. So then what happens is that the self-sabotaging coping mechanism kicks in because it wants to keep you in the box. And I've seen this, guys, with 6-figure traders, 7-figure traders that want to move from 6 figures to 7 figures. There's always that block. They've got all the strategy, they've got the skill set, they've been doing this for a few years, and they still can't seem to break free to make that extra milestone in their journey as a trader. And 9 out of 10, when I go deep into the root cause, I go deep into their conditioning, I always find that the moment we shift that, everything starts to change. Everything starts to change. And before you know it, things start to shift. The P&Ls look different. The momentum in their life look different. They feel different. And they literally shift their reality, their identity shifts, because what we do is we use the subconscious mind or the unconscious mind, and we go deep into where they're using their mind, of course, and using correct practitioner and modality tools that I'm certified in, and we go deep within the mind. We trace it back in their childhood, their conditioning, or even their recent life in terms of their timeline, and we understand, oh, this is where I decided I always sabotage myself. They don't know this consciously, but the unconscious mind can trace it back. And then we find it, and there's an emotion associated with it. There's a feeling that doesn't feel good around that aspect of themselves, and we change it, we delete it, we upgrade it to, I trust my process. But it's not just saying it, it's actually believing it, and it's actually feeling it, and that changes everything, guys. When you believe it, and when you feel it, it's a different energy. It's the abundance mindset energy. It's the confident, conscious trader that we're talking of. So guys, just to wrap up again, my principle and principle number one from extracting over the years of experience is the deep understanding that you obviously very, very clear on, is understanding that your inner world, to master your inner world, is super important, and that starts with belief systems that create your reality. Because from a neuroscientific perspective, how we create our reality is through filtering information and data of our reality. You take 400 million bits of information per processing in our mind through our 5 senses, and it will only produce 2,000 bits. So just imagine how much of your reality you're only seeing and experiencing based on the belief systems and the perceptions and the preconditioned filters that is in your internal reality. So everyone sees a different reality, right? Based on their beliefs, right? The way they see themselves in the mirror, the way they show up in the world, all of that is subjective to their internal perceptions, their internal filters of reality, right? And the reality is we now have the right tools, techniques, and modalities that enable us to change those filters. I didn't know this, guys. Over a decade ago, I did this work myself, and it changed my life. I mean it, guys. It changed my life. When I say that I was stuck in a 9-to-5 job and, thinking that freedom only is for the people out there, and how can I step out of this job that was giving me a lot of security, money, ticked all the boxes, as I mentioned before in my past podcast. The only thing that allowed me to free myself and to change my reality was changing my perceptions, changing my belief systems, that I'm able to become an entrepreneur. I'm able to work for myself. I'm able to start a practice where I help people, able to start a very successful e-commerce, started for 2 years, founded in the past the Conscious Trading Academy, 3 successful conferences out in the USA, having clients from all around the world, and having creating a platform for traders. All of that would never be possible, looking back 7, almost going to my 8th year now of a life of freedom, where I get to choose what I get to choose and when I get to work with who I want to work with, all on my terms, not asking someone for permission to take the day off. Life of freedom, right? That doesn't happen if we don't believe it's possible, if we don't see it in our mind first, if we don't believe it to be true. That is starting point of mastering that inner world and the belief systems that create the reality that we want for ourselves. And here's the reminder, is that you and your responsibility is to look inwards and to see and identify what beliefs do I have that is blocking me in my life today, that's holding me back, that's creating this same patterns. And it could be in trading, or it could be in other aspects of your life. You could be a good trader, but you're miserable in relationships, or you're a lonely person, or you are someone that is unhappy with the self, or it doesn't matter. It can be any part of your reality that you need to take a good look at, and you need to understand that there's work that is required there if the patterns are not serving you. If all patterns are serving you in your life, then good for you, man. You're on the right track. But if you feel that there's something lacking or something missing, or you're not really whole or complete, that is the invitation for you to look inwards. That's the invitation for you to check in on your beliefs. Because I'll wrap up one more time with this statement that is so true. It's so evident in science and neuroscience today, but also in my realm, in my world. I see this every day with all the clients I work with. I'm very fortunate, of course, because they are my best teachers. But the reality is, what you believe, you perceive, and what you perceive, you experience. Look out into this reality. Look out into your world. And if there's something not aligning with what you want, if there's patterns that keep showing up that is against you, know that that is the invitation for some belief to shift in your inner world. And the moment you shift it, mark my words, the moment you shift it correctly, like go deep within the unconscious mind, everything starts to change. So guys, I'll leave you with that. I want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this. If you're watching it on YouTube, please subscribe, please share, please like. This is how we're going to support this channel to start growing. I was always doing streaming online. Now I'm doing the video at the studio here in Dubai. I want you guys to engage, and I want you guys to always reach out, comment if there's anything that resonated with you. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you for taking the time. Much love and positive energy.